the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Staff here. Do you like it? Does it feel like what a top tier ish SEC staff should be? That he has the right ties in the right spots, or do you think it's still got some work to do and it's still a wait and see on some of these positional coaches?
It's a tale of two sides of the ball. Offensively, I think he put together a really good staff. He brought in guys that had worked with him before, that have experience in this offense. Last year, Mississippi State brought in an offensive coordinator. They hired all of the offensive position coaches before the coordinator. So you had a coordinator trying to install an offense that none of these guys had ever worked in before. And, maybe I was a little bit foolish in thinking it could be successful. It obviously was not. This year, you've got guys who've worked with Lebby before. The only one who hasn't is Chad Bumpus, the receivers coach, who State kept because he's an alum. He played football here. He's the best recruiter on the staff. State this year signed 3 4-star recruits at the receiver position. J.J. Harrell, who was committed to Tennessee, Stonka Burnside from here in Starkville, and Mario Craver from the state of Alabama. They also got 2 big-time targets in the transfer portal out of that. That's Chad Bumpus doing that. A former all-SEC wide receiver who's a young guy. He's going to be a good recruiter. So I like that side of the ball. I think they're doing a fine job. Defensively, there's a ton of questions. You bring in Coleman Hutzler from Alabama, who's never been a defensive coordinator before. He was co-coordinator at Texas for a season, but he wasn't the chief play caller. Yeah. You bring in a couple of other guys in Corey Bell and Barnes. Like, is his first name Matt? I can't remember his first name. As your secondary guys, and Matt and Barnes is the co-defensive coordinator, so he sort of has that role. But these are guys who weren't at defensive juggernauts at Florida Atlantic and at Memphis. Now Barnes was at Ohio State before that, but again was not the key guy. And it kind of showed this year in the transfer portal. State was not, despite the fact that State needs immediate impact guys. They have starting positions available at an SEC defense. They didn't get a lot of takers in the transfer portal. And
what do you think that is? I
think that's because nobody knows who Hutzler is. I remember this very clearly. When they hired Hutzler, my first words were, who? And I follow college football. I thought I knew some things. I didn't. So he coached at Alabama. Well, I got friends who cover Alabama. Let me text them and see what they say. And their comments were, don't know much about him. Never really talked to him. So if the people who cover the sport don't know him, you're asking a lot of players to, some of these guys only have 1 year left. Do they want to commit to a rebuild with a guy they don't know a whole lot about? Or do they want to go to programs that are already established? And that's kind of where that went. I think, now that being said, I think those guys are making some good inroads in the class of 25 for the high school side. But I think they're going to have to show something, put some stuff on film of their defense playing well before they're going to have success at the transfer portal level.
Did they swing at bigger names at the DC spot and they just couldn't get them? Or was this like Lebby's guy from the get-go? There
was a lot of smoke around DJ Durkin, who ended up at Auburn. But at the time, the way his contract was structured at Texas A&M, it was going to be like a $5 or $6 million buyout, and nobody's paying that for a coordinator. They're just not. So that was the biggest name that I heard connected to Mississippi State. Hutzler, from what I can tell, was a complete shock. Nobody, because nobody had heard of him. He was the linebackers coach at Alabama. Had never been a coordinator before. But Lebby, apparently, I talked to Hutzler a few weeks back. They had some connections with Lebby, and he felt like that he was the right guy for the job. I think one thing with Mississippi State is they need to improve their recruiting profile a little bit. And I'm not saying State can ever be a program that is consistently a top 10 recruiter. I don't think that's possible. But they've been consistently in that 25 to 35 range for like a decade. That's where they were with Mullen, Moorhead, Leach. That's where they are. They'd like to be a top 20 team. And Hutzler has a reputation as a recruiter. So maybe that played a role in it. And they just feel like, hey, he coached under Nick Saban. He should have learned enough to be able to pull this off. But, we go back to Mullen. Mullen's first year at State, he hired a very experienced defensive coordinator called Torbush. And it just didn't work. And so the next year he was gone, and it was kind of funny. I mean, Mullen ran through defensive coordinators like the rest of us run through pants. He had, I think, 7 of them in 8 years.
Did he really?
He had, hold on. He had Torbush, Manny Diaz, Chris Wilson, Jeff Collins, Manny Diaz, Peter Sermon, Todd Grantham. Yeah, 7.
Wow. My memory, I'm like, I just thought Todd Grantham was there like 4 years.
He was there for 1 season. And
that's crazy. If you left me off with Mullen, like Grantham, I would have said Grantham was there for years.
He left with Mullen when they went to Florida. So, So Mullen made a change after his first year as a defensive coordinator. So my guess is if this defense is really, really bad, you might see a change there. But at the same time, this is something I've been saying a lot on my podcast. You look at Ole Miss's the first year Kiffin was there with Lebby. They were, I think, they were dead last in the country in total defense. Dead last in the country. They could not stop anybody. But they won 5 games. That was the COVID year. And I mean, if they had not played a COVID schedule, because they won 5 SEC games. If they had not played a COVID schedule, they probably would have been 8-4 because they scored on everybody. They were the number 4 offense in the country. So I don't know if State's going to be the number 4 offense in the country, but if you have a top 30, top 40 offense, you can have a 90, 100 defense and still win 6 and maybe even 7 games if you can score enough points.
Well, I think a lot of that comes down to the quarterback play, right? So where are they at with the quarterback? Are you feeling good about the quarterback room in 2024, or are you kind of, I don't know about this?
There's some unknowns, obviously. Blake Shapen is going to be the guy, at least to start the spring, coming in from Baylor. He's a guy who's, when he's been healthy, he was very productive over at Baylor. Was part of that team that won the Big 12 in 2021. But he's struggled.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.